Happy Wednesday, 8th graders. We are continuing on The Book Thief. We are on the trilogy. While Liesel worked, Rudy ran. He did laps of Hubert Oval, ran around the block, and raced almost everyone from the bottom of Himmel Street to Frau Diller's, giving varied head starts. On a few occasions, when Liesel was helping Mama in the kitchen, Rosa would look out the window and say, "What's that little sockle up to this time? All that running out there." Liesel would move to the window. "At least he hasn't painted himself black again." Well, that's something, isn't it? Rudy's reasons. In the middle of August, a Hitler Youth Carnival was being held, and Rudy was intent on winning four events: the 1500, 400, 200, and of course the 100. He liked his new Hitler Youth leaders and wanted to please them, and he wanted to show his old friend Franz Deutscher a thing or two. Four gold medals, he said to Liesel one afternoon when she did laps with him at Hubert Oval, like Jesse Owens back in 36. You're not still obsessed with him, are you? Rudy's feet rhymed with his breathing. Not really, but it would be nice, wouldn't it? Would show all those bastards who said I was crazy. They'd see that I wasn't stupid after all. But can you really win all four events? They slowed to a stop at the end of the track, and Rudy placed his hands on his hips. I have to. For 6 weeks he trained, and when the day of the carnival arrived in mid-August, the sky was hot sunned and cloudless. The grass was overrun with Hitler youths, parents, and a glut of brown-shirted leaders. Rudy Steiner was in peak condition. Look, he pointed out, there's Deutscher. Through the clusters of crowd, the blonde epitome of Hitler Youth standards was giving instructions to two members of his division. They were nodding and occasionally stretching. One of them shielded his eyes from the stun like a salute. You want to say hello? Lisa asked. No thanks. I'll do that later. When I've won. The words were not spoken, but they were definitely there, somewhere between Rudy's blue eyes and Deutscher's advisory hands. There was the obligatory march around the grounds, the anthem, Heil Hitler. Only then could they begin. When Rudy's age group was called for the 1500, Liesel wished him luck in a typically German manner. Hals and Beinbrüch, Sockel. She told him to break his neck and leg. Boys collected themselves on the far side of the circular field. Some stretched, some focused, and the rest were there because they had to be. Next to Liesel, Rudy's mother, Barbara, sat with her youngest children. A thin blanket was brimming with kids and loosened grass. Can you see Rudy? She asked him. He's the one on the far left. Barbara Steiner was the kind of woman whose hair always looked recently combed. Where? Said one of the girls. Probably Bettina, the youngest. I can't see him at all. The last one. No, not there. There. They were still in the identification process when the starter's gun gave off its smoke and sound. The small Steiners rushed to the fence. For the first lap, a group of 7 boys led the field. On the second, it dropped to 5, and on the next lap, 4. Rudy was the fourth runner on every lap until the last. A man on the right was saying that the boy coming second looked the best. He was the tallest. You wait, he told his nonplussed wife. With 200 left, he'll break away. The man was wrong. A gargantuan brown-shirted official informed the group that there was 1 lap to go. He certainly wasn't suffering under the ration system. He called out as the lead pack crossed the line, and it was not the second boy who accelerated, but the fourth, and he was 200 meters early. Rudy ran. He did not look back at any stage. Like an elastic rope, he lengthened his lead until any thought of someone else winning snapped altogether. He took himself around the track as the 3 runners behind him fought each other for the scraps. In the home stretch, there was nothing but blonde hair and space. And when he crossed the line, he didn't stop. He didn't raise his arm. There wasn't even a bent over relief. He simply walked another 20 meters and eventually looked over his shoulder to watch the others cross the line. On the way back to his family, he met first with his leaders and then with Franz Deutscher. They both nodded. Steiner? Deutscher? Looks like all those laps I gave you paid off, huh? Looks like it. He would not smile until he'd won all 4. a point for later reference. Not only was Rudy recognized now as a good school student, he was a gifted athlete too. For Liesel, there was the 400. She finished seventh, then fourth in her heat of the 200. All she could see up ahead were the hamstrings and bobbing ponytails of the girls in front. In the long jump, she enjoyed the sand packed around her feet more than any distance, and the shot put wasn't her greatest moment either. This day, she realized, was Rudy's. In the 400 final, he led from the back stretch to the end, and he won the 200 only narrowly. You getting tired? Liesel asked him. It was early afternoon by then. Of course not. He was breathing heavily and stretching his calves. What are you talking about, Samich? The hell would you know? When the heats of the 100 were called, he rose slowly to his feet and followed the trail of adolescence toward the track. Lisa went after him. Hey, Rudy. She pulled at his shirt sleeve. Good luck. I'm not tired, he said. I know. He winked at her. He was tired. In his heat, Rudy slowed to finish second, and after 10 minutes of other races, the final was called. Two other boys had looked formidable, and Lisa had a feeling in her stomach that Rudy could not win this one. Tommy Mueller, who'd finished second to last in his heat, stood with her at the fence. He'll win it, he informed her. I know. No, he won't. When the finalists reached the starting line, Rudy dropped to his knees and began digging starting holes with his hands. A balding brown shirt wasted no time in walking over, telling him to cut it out. Lisa watched the adult figure pointing, and she could see the dirt falling to the ground as Rudy brushed his hands together. When they were called forward, Lisa tightened her grip on the fence. One of the boys' falls started. The gun was shot twice. It was Rudy. Again, the official had words with him, and the boy nodded. Once more, and he was out. Set for the second time, Lisa watched with concentration, and for the first few seconds, she could not believe what she was seeing. Another false start was recorded, and it was the same athlete who had done it. In front of her, she created a perfect race in which Rudy trailed but came home to win in the last 10 meters. What she actually saw, however, was Rudy's disqualification. He was escorted to the side of the track and was made to stand there alone as the remainder of the boys stepped forward. They lined up and raced. A boy with rusty hair and a big stride won by at least 5 meters. Rudy remained. Later, when the day was complete and the sun was taken from the Himmel Street, Liesel sat with her friend on the footpath. They talked about everything else, from Franz Deutscher's face at the 1500 to one of the 11-year-old girls having a tantrum after losing the discus. Before they proceeded to their respective homes, Rudy's voice reached over and handed Liesel the truth. For a while, it sat on her shoulder, but a few thoughts later, it made its way to her ear. Rudy's voice, I did it on purpose. When the confession registered, Liesel asked the only question available, but why, Rudy? Why did you do it? He was standing with a hand on his hip, and he did not answer. There was nothing but a knowing smile and a slow walk that lulled him home. They never talked about it again. For Liesel's part, she often wondered what Rudy's answer might have been had she pushed him. Perhaps three medals had shown what he'd wanted to show, or he was afraid to lose that final race. Excuse me. In the end, the only explanation she allowed herself to hear was an inner teenage voice. Because he isn't Jesse Owens. Only when she got up to leave did she notice that three imitation gold medals sitting next to her. She knocked on the signer's door and held them out to him. You forgot these. No, I didn't. He closed the door, and Liesel took the medals home. She walked with him down to the basement and told Max about her friend, Rudy Steiner. He truly is stupid, she concluded. Clearly, Max agreed, but I doubt he was fooled. They both started work then, Max on his sketchbook, Lisa on the dream carrier. She was in the latter stages of the novel, where the young priest was doubting his faith after meeting a strange and elegant woman. When she placed it face down on her lap, Max asked when she thought she'd finish it. A few days at the most. Then a new one? The book thief looked at the basement ceiling. Maybe, Max. She closed the book and leaned back. If I'm lucky. The next book. It's not the Duden Dictionary and Thesaurus, as you might be expecting. No, the dictionary comes at the end of this small trilogy, and this is only the second installment. This is the part where Liesel finishes a dream carrier and steals a story called A Song in the Dark. As always, it was taken from the mayor's house. The only difference was that she made her way to the upper part of town alone. There was no Rudy that day. It was a morning rich with both sun and frothy clouds. Liesel stood in the mayor's library with green in her fingers and book titles at her lips. She was comfortable enough on this occasion to run her fingers along the shelves, a short replay of her original visit to the room, and she whispered many of the titles as she made her way along. Under the Cherry Tree, The Tenth Lieutenant. Typically, more of the titles tempted her, but after a good minute or two in the room, she settled for A Song in the Dark, most likely because the book was green. She did not yet own a book of that color. The engraved writing on the cover was white, and there was a small insignia of a flute between the title and the name of the author. She climbed with it from the window, saying thanks on her way out. Without Rudy, she felt a good degree of absence, but on that particular morning, for some reason, the book thief was happiest alone. She went about her work and read the book next to the Yampa River, far enough away from the occasional headquarters of Victor Chemmel and the previous gang of Arthur Berg. No one came, no one interrupted, and Lisa read four of the very short chapters of A Song in the Dark, and she was happy. It was a pleasure. It was the pleasure and satisfaction of good stealing. A week later, the trilogy of happiness was completed. In the last days of August, a gift arrived, or in fact, was noticed. It was late afternoon. Lisa was watching Christina Mueller jumping rope on Himmel Street. Rudy Steiner skidded to a stop in front of her brother's bike. Do you have some time? He asked. She shrugged. For what? Think you better come. He dumped the bike and went to collect the other one from home. In front of her, Lisa watched the pedal spin. They rode up to Grand Strassen, where Rudy stopped and waited. Well? Lisa asked. What is it? Rudy pointed. Look closer. Gradually, they rode to a better position behind a blue spruce tree. Through the prickly branches, Lisa noticed the closed window and then the object leaning on the glass. Is that? Rudy nodded. They debated the issue for many minutes before they agreed it needed to be done. It had obviously been placed there intentionally, and if this was a trap, it was worth it. Among the powdery blue branches, Lisa said, a book thief would do it. She dropped the bike, observed the street, and crossed the yard. The shadows of clouds were buried among the dusky grass. Were they holes fallen into, or patches of extra darkness for hiding in? Her imagination sent her sliding down one of those holes into the evil clutches of the mayor himself. If nothing else, those thoughts distracted her, and she was at the window even quicker than she'd hoped. It was like the Whistler all over again. Her nerves licked her palms. Small streams of sweat rippled under her arms. When she raised her head, she could read the title, The Complete Duden Dictionary and Thesaurus. Briefly, she turned to Rudy and mouthed the words, It's a dictionary. He shrugged and held out his arms. She worked methodically, sliding the window upward, wondering how all this would look from inside the house. She envisioned the sight of her thieving hand reaching up, making the window rise until the book was felled. It seemed to surrender slowly, like a falling tree. Got it. There was barely a disturbance or sound. The book simply tilted toward her, and she took it with her free hand. She even closed the window, nice and smooth, then turned and walked back across the potholes of clouds. Nice, Rudy said as he gave her the bike. Thank you. They rode toward the corner where the day's importance reached them. Liesel knew it was that feeling again of being watched. The voice pedaled inside her 2 laps. Look at the window, look at the window. She was compelled. Like an itch that demands a fingernail, she felt an intense desire to stop. She placed her feet on the ground and turned to face the mayor's house and the library windows. And she saw. Certainly she should have known this might happen, but she could not hide the shock that loitered inside when she witnessed the mayor's wife standing behind the glass. She was transparent, but she was there. Her fluffy hair was as it always was, and her wounded eyes and mouth and expression held themselves up for viewing. Very slowly, she lifted her hand to the book, the thief on the street, a motionless wave. In her state of shock, Liesel said nothing to Rudy or herself. She only stared at herself and raised her hand to acknowledge the mayor's wife in the window. Juden Dictionary meaning number 2. Verzehung, forgiveness. To stop feeling anger, animosity, or resentment. Related words, absolution, acquittal, mercy. On the way home, they stopped at the bridge and inspected the heavy black book. As Rudy flipped through the pages, he arrived at a letter. He picked it up and looked slowly toward the book thief. It's got your name on it. The river ran. Liesel took hold of the paper. The letter. Dear Liesel, I know you find me pathetic and loathsome. Look that word up if you don't know it. But I must tell you that I am not so stupid as to not see your footprints in the library. When I noticed the first book missing, I thought I had simply misplaced it. But then I saw the outlines of some feet on the floor in certain patches of the light. It made me smile. I was glad that you took what was rightfully yours. I then made the mistake of thinking that would be the end of it. When you came back, I should have been angry, but I wasn't. I could hear you the last time, but I decided to leave you alone. You only ever take one book, and it will take 1,000 visits till all of them are gone. And my hope is that one day you will knock on the front door and enter the library in a more civilized manner. Again, I am sorry we can no longer keep your foster mother employed. Lastly, I hope you find this dictionary and thesaurus useful as you read your stolen books. Yours sincerely, Ilsa Herman. We'd better head home, Rudy suggested, but Liesel did not go. Can you wait here for 10 minutes? Of course. Liesel struggled back up to 8 Grand Strasse and sat on the familiar territory of the front entrance. The book was with Rudy, but she held the letter and rubbed her fingers on the folded paper as the steps grew heavier around her. She tried 4 times to knock on the daunting flesh of the door, but she could not bring herself to do it. The most she could accomplish was to place her knuckles gently on the warmness of the wood. Again her brother found her. From the bottom of the steps, his knee healing nicely, he said, Come on, Liesel, knock. As she made her second getaway, she could soon see the distant figure of Rudy at the bridge. The wind showered through her hair. Her feet swam with the pedals. Liesel Meminger was a criminal, but not because she'd stolen a handful of books through an open window. You should have knocked, she thought, and although there was a good portion of guilt, there was also the juvenile trace of laughter. As she rode, she tried to tell herself something. You don't deserve to be this happy, Liesel. You really don't. Can a person steal happiness, or just another infernal human trick? Liesel shrugged away from her thoughts. She crossed the bridge and told Rudy to hurry up and not to forget the book. They rode home on rusty bikes. They rode home a couple of miles. From summer to autumn, and from a quiet night to the noisy breath of the bombing of Munich. The sound of sirens. With a small collection of money Hans had earned in the summer, he brought home a second-hand radio. This way, he said, we can hear the raids when the raids are coming even before the siren starts. They make a cuckoo sound and then announce the regions at risk. He placed it on the kitchen table and switched it on. They also tried to make it work in the basement for Max, but there was nothing but static and severed voices in the speakers. In September, they did not hear it as they slept. Either the radio was already half broken, or was swallowed immediately by the crying sound of sirens. A hand was shoved gently at Liesel's shoulder as she slept. Papa's voice followed it in, afraid. Liesel, wake up. We have to go. There was a disorientation of interrupted sleep, and Liesel could barely decipher the outline of Papa's face. The only thing truly visible was his voice. In the hallway, they stopped. Wait, said Rosa. Through the dark, they rushed to the basement. The lamp was lit. Max edged out from behind the paint cans and drop sheets. His face was tired, and he hitched his thumbs nervously into his pants. Time to go, huh? Hans walked to him. Yes, time to go. He shook his hand and slapped his arm. We'll see you when we get back, right? Of course. Rosa hugged him, as did Liesel. Goodbye, Max. Weeks earlier, they discussed whether they should all stay together in their own basement, or if the three of them should go down the road to a family by the name of Fiedler. It was Max who convinced them. They said it's not deep enough here. I've already put you in enough danger. Hans had nodded. It's a shame we can't take you with us. It's a disgrace. It's how it is. Outside, the sirens howled at the houses, and the people came running, hobbling, and recoiling as they exited their homes. Night watched. Some people watched it back, trying to find the tin can planes as they drove across the sky. Himmel Street was a procession of tangled people, all wrestling with their most precious possessions. In some cases, it was a baby, in others, a stack of photo albums or a wooden box. Liesel carried her books between her arm and her ribs. Frau Holzefeld was heaving a suitcase, laboring on the footpath with bulbous eyes and small step feet. Papa, who'd forgotten everything, even his accordion, rushed back to her and rescued the suitcase from her grip. Jesus, Mary and Joseph, what have you got in here? He asked. An anvil? Frau Holzefeld advanced alongside him. The necessities. The Fiedlers lived 6 houses down. They were a family of four, all with wheat colored hair and good German eyes. More important, they had a nice, deep basement. 22 people crammed themselves into it, including the Steiner family, Frau Holzefeld, Fifkes, a young man, and a family named Jensen. In the interest of civil environment, Rosa Huberman and Frau Holzefeld were kept separate, though some things were above petty arguments. One light globe dangled from the ceiling, and the room was dank and cold. Jagged walls jutted out and poked people in the back as they stood and spoke. The muffled sound of sirens leaked in from somewhere. They could hear a distorted version of them that somehow found a way inside. Although creating considerable apprehension about the quality of the shelter, at least they could hear the three sirens that would signal the end of the raid, safety. They didn't need a Luftwaffe, an air raid supervisor. It wasn't long before Rudy found Liesel and was standing next to her. His hair was pointing at something in the ceiling. Isn't this great? She couldn't resist some sarcasm. It's lovely. Oh, come on, Liesel, don't be like that. What's the worst can happen apart from all of us being flattened or fried or whatever bombs do? Liesel looked around, gauging the faces. She started compiling a list of who was most afraid. The hit list: number one, Frau Holzefeld; two, Mr. Fiedler; three, the young man; four, Rosa Huberman. Frau Holzefeld's eyes were trapped open. Her wire frame was stooped forward, and her mouth was a circle. Herr Fiedler busied himself by asking people, sometimes repeatedly, how they were feeling. The young man, Rolf Schultz, kept to himself in the corner, speaking silently at the air around him, castigating it. His hands were cemented in his pockets. Rosa rocked back and forth ever so gently. Liesel, she whispered, come here. She held the girl from behind, tightening her grip. She sang a song, but it was so quiet that Liesel could not make it out. The notes were born on her breath, and they died at her lips. Next to them, Papa remained quiet and motionless. At one point, He placed his warm hand on Liesel's cool skull. "You'll live," and said. And it was right. To their left, Alex and Barbara Steiner stood with the younger of their children, Emma and Bettina. The two girls were attached to their mother's right leg. The oldest boy, Kurt, stared ahead in a perfect Hitler Youth stance, holding the hand of Karen, who was tiny even for her 7 years. The 10-year-old Anna Marie played with the pulpy surface of the cement wall. On the other side of the Steiners were Fifkes and the Jensen family. Fifkes kept himself from whistling. The bearded Mr. Jensen held his wife tightly, and their two kids drifted in and out of silence. Occasionally, they pestered each other, but they held back when it came to the beginning of a true argument. After 10 minutes or so, what was most important in the cellar was the kind of non movement. Their bodies were welded together, and only their feet changed position or pressure. Stillness was shackled to their faces. They watched each other and waited. Duden Dictionary meaning number 3. Angst. Fear. An unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger. Related words: terror, horror, panic, fright, alarm. From other shelters, there were stories of singing Deutschland über alles, or of people arguing amid the staleness of their own breath. No such things happened in the Fiedler shelter. In that place, there was only fear and apprehension, and the dead song in Rosa Huberman's cardboard lips. Not long before the siren signaled the end, Alex Steiner, the man with the immovable wooden face, coaxed the kids from his wife's legs. He was able to reach out and grapple for his son's free hand. Kurt, still stoic and full of stare, took it up and tightened his grip gently on the hand of his sister. Soon everyone in the cellar was holding the hand of another, and the group of Germans stood in a lumpy circle. The cold hands melted into the warm ones, and in some cases the feeling of another human pulse was transported. It came through the layers of pale, stiffened skin. Some of them closed their eyes, waiting for their final demise, or hoping for a sign that the raid was finally over. Did they deserve any better, these people? How many had actively persecuted others high on the scent of Hitler's gaze, repeating his sentences, his paragraphs, his opus? Was Rosa Huberman responsible? The hider of a Jew? Or Hans? Did they all deserve to die? The children? The answer to each of those questions interests me very much, though I cannot allow them to seduce me. I only know that all these young people would have sensed me that night, excluding the youngest of the children. I was a suggestion. I was the advice, my imagined feet walking into the kitchen and down the corridor. As often the case with humans, when I read about them in the book thief's words, I pitied them, though not as much as I felt for the ones I scooped up from various camps in that time. The Germans in basements were pitiable, surely, but at least they had a chance. That basement was not a washroom. They were not sent there for a shower. For those people, life was still achievable. In the uneven circle, the minutes slipped by. Liesel held Rudy's hand and her mama's. Only one thought sat in her: Max. How would Max survive if the bombs arrived on Himmel Street? Around her, she examined the Fiedler's basement. It was much sturdier and considerably deeper than the one at 33 Himmel Street. Silently, she asked Papa, "And are you thinking about him too?" Whether the silent question registered or not, he gave the girl a quick nod. It was followed a few minutes later by the three sirens of temporary peace. The people at 45 Himmel Street sank with relief. Some clenched their eyes and opened them again. A cigarette was passed around. Just as it made its way to Rudy Steiner's lips, it was snatched away by his father. "Not you, Jesse Owens." The children hugged their parents, and it took many minutes for all of them to fully realize that they were alive and they were going to be alive. Only then did their feet climb the stairs to Herbert Fiedler's kitchen. Outside, a procession of people made its way silently along the streets. Many of them looked up and thanked God for their lives. When the Hubermans made it home, they headed directly to the basement. But it seemed that Max was not there. The lamp was small and orange, and they could not see him or hear an answer. Max? He's disappeared. Max, are you there? I'm here. They originally thought the words had come from behind the drop sheets and paint cans, but Lisa was first to see him in front of them. His jaded face was camouflaged among the painting materials and fabric. He was sitting there with stunned eyes and lips. When they walked across, he spoke again. I couldn't help it, he said. It was Rosa who replied. She crouched down to face him. What are you talking about, Max? I. He struggled to answer. When everything was quiet, I went up to the corridor and the curtain in the living room was open. Just a crack. I could see outside. I watched only for a few seconds. He had not seen the outside world for 22 months. There was no anger or reproach. It was Papa who spoke. How did it look? Max lifted his head with great sorrow and great astonishment. There were stars, he said. They burned my eyes. 4 of them, 2 people on their feet, the other 2 remained seated. All had seen a thing or two that night. This place was the real basement. This was the real fear. Max gathered himself and stood to move back behind the sheets. He wished him good night, but he didn't make it beneath the stairs. With Mama's permission, Lisa stayed with him until morning, reading a song in the dark as he sketched and wrote in his books. From a Himmel Street window, he wrote, the stars set fire to my eyes. And that's all for today. We will continue our story again tomorrow.